how to easily multiply your passive income. Guys, I want to talk about this. You know, the income that we make through print on demand, stock photography, selling books, e-commerce, all these kinds of different businesses, all these kinds of different side hustles, if you will. It's really great to produce, don't get me wrong, but it requires effort, right? One of the ways that you can increase that income without necessarily having to do more work is using the element of time, specifically to multiply your income. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, it comes down to investing. Now, let me explain what I mean, because investing could mean a lot of things. It could mean that I'm putting more time into something. It could mean that I'm putting more effort, more money into something. It could also mean investing in the stock market. It could, there's a bunch of different ways to invest. But let me actually explain. So, my current goal is to do the same thing that we're talking about here today, which is funneling my income into things that can produce effectively more income for me. And I guess you can call that passive income, right? But it's my way of kind of doing less work over time, right? That's kind of like my prioritization now. My goal is not to work as hard. Don't get me wrong, I love working hard, but it's not to work hard forever. It comes to a point where you shouldn't hustle forever. Now, if you were listening to my videos 2-3 years ago, I was very gung-ho on hard work because that was the season of my life where I needed to work hard. But at a certain point in time now, things kind of change, and it's not necessarily about hard work. It's about making the right moves. And so I kind of want to talk about this. So I kind of mentioned it, but all of you guys are producing income in some sort of way. It could be print on demand, it could be Etsy, it could be stock photography, it could be e-commerce, it could be blogging, it could be any of these things that I'm mentioning. And it could be even more. Maybe you're a YouTuber, maybe you're a TikToker, maybe you're an influencer of some sort. Maybe you have an affiliate marketing blog. There's a lot of different things that you can do to produce an income. We can all agree on that. But it's about reallocating that income. A lot of the times, especially in the past, I kind of get this sentiment that we make passive income just so we can have more spending power, just so we can make, essentially, purchases that we want to make. Now, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but if this is a passive income YouTube channel, I think it's only right to talk about investing, like I said. And it would be cool to generate income regardless of how much income you're already funneling into the system. So, for example, if you're making $100, right? Let's say from passive income online, you're a beginner. Whether you have $100, whether you have $1,000 or $100,000, it would be cool to make a percentage off of that, essentially that principal, that number that you put in. And really what that is your money is working for you. You guys know Kevin O'Leary. I used to watch these Shark Tank videos, and he used to say all the time, when I make an investment, my investment or my dollars are like soldiers. They go out to war, they go out to battle, and I want them to bring back new soldiers, new resources, new money, right? And that's kind of the idea of what investing actually is. And when you're short on cash, where you don't have money, where you're not producing income, you probably have more time. And with that time, you can put in more effort and then produce more income that way. When you have less time, you can take your money and invest it and produce more income that way. So there's different ways depending on your situation, who you are. But regardless of how much you're making, you can still produce more. And the idea is to produce more with less effort in general. So let's kind of talk about this. When you're investing something that you've already built. Now you got to take a look at what you've already built. You're already income streams, right? Now, the goal for me, and like I said, I'm going to repeat this, isn't to hustle harder. It was at one point in time. I don't necessarily need to do that anymore. It's to redeploy smarter. And this is something I had to learn and realize over time. That's what, I'm literally just reading here as I wrote this, is that the younger I was, the more of kind of a young bull. I was more of a young bull. I was very aggressive, very pushy, worked very hard, kind of glamorized the idea of never sleep, work. And like I said, my approach is a little bit different now, but I really prioritize more of my freedom, my freedom of life, I guess you could say, you know? And I think a lot of people, maybe who are a little bit older, prioritize that. Maybe not necessarily old, but just a little bit older, meaning you're outside of that range of like 18 to 25. I remember during that period of time in my life, I was, working as hard as I humanly possibly could, and there was nothing necessarily wrong with that, at least in my point of view at the time. And there still isn't anything wrong with that. I think everybody has a certain point in time where they use all their resources mentally, physically, emotionally to invest it in something, get results out of it. But like I said, I'm at a point now where I prioritize my effectiveness as opposed to how much energy I could put in. Okay? So that's really where investing comes into play. Robert Kiyosaki, who wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad, that's what he's famous for. He really, his kind of stories, his story's made up about, the rich dad and the poor dad. He's been exposed for this many times. But he did say something quite intelligent and very, very, I guess you could say, amazing to bring forth to the average person who listens. He said there's like these 4 quadrants. And you have the quadrant where there's 4 different types of people, but you can go from quadrant to quadrant to quadrant in your life. And the first quadrant is being an employee. The second quadrant is becoming self-employed. The third one is becoming a business owner, running a business. And then finally, it's becoming an investor. An investor ideally is where you want to be. And you want to get to investor as fast as possible. Now, at the time, like I said, when I was working very, very hard, I kind of didn't realize the value of being an investor. I thought because I'm working hard and I'm getting tremendous results working and making the money, that I thought that there was no end to that, and now I see things differently, like I said, because there are different technologies in the marketplace, there are different opportunities that are coming to an end, and new opportunities that are emerging, and because of these changes, your success level kind of changes with time. Like, for example, if you're, let's just say, a famous actor, and you're on point, and everybody's watching you, and you've been in a bunch of movies and series and you're getting all this attention, there's going to be a point in time where the attention kind of dwindles down. You produce less income. What can you do in a position where you've already made money, but you need to have something going on? You need to still produce more, but you don't need at the same level as you did before. Well, that's where investing comes into play. And the beautiful thing about investing is it doesn't really require a ton of work. So let's kind of get into that. So one thing about investing is that history repeats itself. And we saw this, let's talk about the marketplace, for example. 2008, biggest crash probably in history. The S&P 500 dropped over 50%. Investors who stayed in doubled their money in the next 5 years. So they had to wait through a 5-year period, and that is pretty significant for numbers to equal out, essentially break even. And then finally, right, a little bit after, within the next few years, the money doubled. The money in the marketplace doubled. We've seen a slight crash in 2020. I don't want to say slight crash because it depends on what stock you're in and things like that. But it was a 34% drop overall in the market. And this was in a matter of weeks. By mid-2021, which is literally not even that long after, it hit all-time highs in terms of the market. The market always rebounds. That's kind of the point, right? History always repeats itself. So let me explain how that relates to today, okay? A real-life example. Let's use Robinhood stock, for example, and I'll kind of pull it up here in just a minute. But Robinhood stock hit $65.28 at its peak, and that was literally not too long ago. We're talking about a little over a month ago. And then recently, within the last 30 days, I think really within the last 2 weeks, it's dropped to $32.89. Now you look at that number, and that's pretty much almost half, almost 50%. We're looking at like 48%, okay? Now it's a little bit up. It's up to $43.68. Now let's kind of look at the stock in real time, okay? So I'm here on TradingView, and let's see what we get here. I don't even know how to get rid of this. Let's see if I can get rid of it. Let me try to refresh this page here. Okay. And this is the Robinhood stock. And Robinhood stock, let's see here. It shows that obviously the highest point from the actual stock, that point, is 65, 20, 28, 29, roughly. Okay. And then we go down to the lowest point, is right here, about 20, 29, 28 something. Now, if I kind of zoom in, we'll kind of have the numbers. But the point is this is what was logged in my account when I was investing in Robinhood. All right. Really, the stock was like 32, but here it just shows 29. This is what people kind of were requesting to get in at. But roughly, let's just say $29, $30, right? Now, that's kind of severe. That's a kind of huge drop. And we're talking about in a matter of days. So pretty much from the 18th of February, once DeepSeek was released, all the way down to here, which is April 7th. That's not a long period of time with a huge drop, right? Almost half. And during this period of time, guys, a lot of people sold off, right? Pretty significant sell-off if you really think about it. And so what's the solution here? Well, the solution kind of is to stick to the fundamentals, the concepts of investing, is that history always does repeat itself. I don't usually talk about investing. A lot of times we talk about money making, but you can make a lot more money investing than you can working, because investing is really about riding the wave versus swimming in the ocean. You see what I'm saying? You see the kind of ideology or metaphor, if you will, right? Working is kind of swimming in the ocean. Investing is more of like riding the wave. You can get much further riding the wave with less effort. Now, you might not necessarily want or feel comfortable to invest in the market. I'm not necessarily telling you that you have to, but you got to find ways for yourself to invest and produce income from the investment. So you guys hear me say things like, I have virtual assistants. That's an example of an investment. I'm putting money into someone that can do work for me, and that work gets produced into income. I've been doing that for years. Same thing the way I use software tools, AI tools that I will pay for that will then produce, once again, income for me. So investing doesn't always have to be in a market. I'm just simply using that example. And I kind of want to lay something out here. If you do choose to invest in the market, I have this little kind of, I guess you could say a little idea, okay? Imagine somebody's making $300 from print on demand, just on average a month, $400 from Etsy, $150 a month from stock photo platforms. Total, that's $850 a month. Let's kind of look at that. Look at what that means later down the road in terms of income. Well, if the person just purely saved that income, didn't really do anything with it, in 20 years, that amount would be $204,000, right? So this kind of gives power to somebody who is contemplating, should I keep working on my side hustles? Should I keep trying to do them even if I'm not making money? Eventually, your income will compound, will grow as you're saving. But not even just interest, just as you're saving. And over a period of 10 years, that income will be $102,000 if you're assuming that, you're saving $850 every single month from these side income hustles, let's say. Okay. Now, if you add the component of interest, meaning basically the inflation of our society, the growth of the market, which is effectively inflation, and inflation's a part of it. I don't want to get too specific, but if you essentially allow interest to be added to the equation, instead of making $204,000 in 20 years, you would have made $443,000. Now, that's more than double. The rule of 7. If you're familiar with the rule of 7, is if you wait 7 years at a 7% interest, you're effectively going to double your money. Now, this is not 7 years. This is 20 years. 20 years, 7% interest, you will more than double your money. If you wait 10 years, right, 147,000 is what you would make with a 7% interest. Now, the reason why we put out 7% interest here is because they say that the average market, the average growth every year on the market is about 11 to 10%. I just put a 7% as a, I guess you could say, conservative approach. Now, clearly, not every single year in the market is growth. You might have one year where the market grows 32%, and then the next year the market doesn't grow at all. That's a perfect example of how the market actually works. But once again, we're using the market as a symbol for investments. If you're not going to use the market, then what are you going to use? But the point is that you need to figure out where to put your money, the money that you're already earning, and figuring out how for it to grow effectively without you having to work harder. That's kind of the idea. And it's really a very, I don't want to say easy, but it's a very enjoyable way of making money because it doesn't really hurt you. It's not like you have to break your back to earn more income. Okay? Now, let's kind of dive a little bit deeper into this. All right? There's a dip right now in the market. You could see here that, let me just pull up the stock here. Let me refresh this. Okay? There's a dip. This dip is not the end of the world. If you invest money that you desperately need, well, then you're doing investing effectively wrong. You have to find the surplus. This dip right here is where the amateurs start to lose focus. They get scared and they sell off. Okay? And that's fine. It's fine if you're an amateur. Hopefully the people who are listening to my videos are not amateurs, but it happens. Today is Sunday, so the market is going to open very quickly, or pretty much already opened. I mean, it's 10 o'clock. There's some movement, pre-market movement. Technically, it's not market open, but there is market movement at like 8 o'clock it starts, or 8:30. I don't even remember. But the point is we're kind of still in a downtrend, but hopefully things recover over time in the near future. If not, it's perfectly fine. I mean, it's just a waiting game. But when you do invest, ideally you would invest things that kind of don't weigh on you, right? You're not too worried if the money goes up or down, right? Because the reality is that there are days where things go down and there are days where things go up. And so you take money that's surplus, you figure out how to invest it. You don't necessarily need to invest it in the stock market, but you need to figure out how can I put $1 in and get 1 point whatever dollars back. Okay? Doesn't matter what it is, but just got to figure it out. Now, I wanted to use some examples. Shopify, Netflix, Robinhood, even Meta stock. We can look into these things. So let me go over here and let's look for other stock. Like, for example, let's pull up Meta here. Pull up Meta. Meta's a little bit better because over the long term, you could really see its history. And look at this huge dip right here. So this dip was effectively from, let's see here, the date year 21, of September. And it starts going down, 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 all the way down to the worst date, November of 22. So that's a pretty severe amount of time. Like, that's just straight down. Investors are probably getting scared here. But to those who hold on, that's where the riches come in. And slowly, they start to go upward. Now, a perfect investor would invest low, buy low, sell high. But the problem is you can't really fully control this, especially if you're investing somewhere here. Nobody really is fully aware of exactly when to pull the trigger, which is why, in this specific type of investing, it's good to learn the game, have money on the side, things like that. But you look at this downward period, this stock value was equivalent to almost like a couple years, maybe a year or two after the stock opened. Had its IPO, I think. So that's pretty, I don't want to say IPO, but I mean, come on now. I mean, we're not far off from it. And then it kind of shot forward. Now, I don't know how long this dip is going to take. This is our current dip here. Okay, if you look at the dates, like I said, ever since DeepSeek kind of released that date in February 18th, February 14th, that kind of area, things started to really tumble. Now, who knows how far it's going to go? Maybe it will start to go up. Who really knows? We're not really sure. But the point here is that eventually it will. Eventually it will go up. But people down here couldn't imagine that one day the stock is going to be up here. You're talking about a difference from a price of $87 all the way up to $739. That's almost 10x. That's like 9.5x. That's huge. It's a tremendous kind of upswing. Now, granted, from the lowest point, which was November 22nd, to the highest point was a period of, almost 2 years? So it is pretty severe. But, I mean, what a wild ride to be on, right? It starts all the way back here. And this is every stock pretty much. I don't want to say every stock, but this is a tremendous amount of stocks, right? We said Facebook, we said Robinhood. Let's take a look at Amazon stock, right? And Amazon stock might be a little bit, I don't want to say kind of like a false, idea, but Amazon stock did split. But let's go ahead and take a look at it here, okay? And you can kind of see its history as well. Is it has its periods of its ups, and then it kind of has its down periods, right? You can kind of see here, shot down, goes up. And you can see these swings are relatively severe. That's kind of why I personally have the approach, and I'll talk about this again in just a few minutes, but my approach personally is more of a day trading approach, and then if the stock goes down, it's just a matter of waiting. That's all it is. So what your real goal should be is to play the long game, to be able to separate yourself from the money that you're investing and let time do the heavy lifting. It could be 5 years, it could be 2 years, it could be 3 years, it could be 10 years. But ideally, you take that money, set it to the side in some sort of investment that ends up panning out. And you need to have some sort of budget, obviously, but the idea is you don't want that money to be something that you need on your day-to-day life basis. That's, pretty substantial, because if you need that money and ends up on the downward, path, it's not going to look too bright for you. So pay attention to that. Now, the best way to building a passive income empire over time, and I could talk about this now because I effectively finished my building process, is you create income, or you create systems rather, that produce the income, you monetize off of that, and then from monetization, you reinvest. And then once you reinvest, you just repeat the cycle. Most people decide not to quit their jobs pretty early. They continue to work even if they made enough money. So it's just very simple. You're just taking the income that you bring in from some sort of hustle, some sort of business, some sort of endeavor, and you're investing it. Once again, everybody invests their money differently, so it's not like you have to do the stock market kind of approach. Everybody has a different, reality. But you take that money, you invest it, it multiplies, and the more money you get, you just keep reinvesting. It's just that simple. And I've talked about this before, but there's never this one big thing that's going to produce you all your income. In the same notion, it's never going to be one big investment that changes your life, or you hit the mega millions, it's the jackpot. Really, for 99.99999% of people, effectively all the population, nobody really hits the lottery here, right? It's consistent growth over time, diversification, and really just constantly chasing that kind of endeavor. You guys hear of the FIRE movement. What really people do during FIRE is, prior to reaching a point of financial independence, they are building and increasing as much income as they possibly can, shuffling it towards their investments, and they want to get to a point where before a certain age, to retire so that they don't have to work effectively the same term as normal people have to work. Usually people retire at like 65, 60 years old, something like that. So their goal is to produce as much income, be able to retire early, hence the name, financially independent, retire early. And with that, they're going to have to make investments that are, let's just say, above average in quantity, right? So I was listening to a video the other day where somebody was asking, like, how can I retire in 10 years? And the host of the video saying, you're effectively going to have to, invest an extra $6,200 a month to retire. Now, is that practical for everybody? No, but in our case, guys, we don't necessarily have to worry about, like I said, the big win or striking it gold right away. It's about consistency, it's about growth, and it's about, consistency over time. That's really what it comes down to without being exaggerative. Now, my final thoughts, I just kind of want to get into this, is income is built through a ladder. Now, I find that it takes long to build to that ladder, that pyramid, if you will, but it's very, very easy to cut it down very quickly. I mean, just some bad life mistakes can really ruin you. So you want to take time to study your investments. You don't want to be overly sure about your investments. I hear a lot of people in my personal life where they're like, yo, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And I'm kind of in my head saying, I don't think this is going to work out. So I'll say to them, hey, are you sure? Are you sure this is going to work out? It doesn't look like a good idea. I mean, I wouldn't do it if I were you. They're 100% sure, but, or they seem assured, but they're really just going down the wrong path. So review your investments, think about your investments, take your time with your investments, and also don't be too disappointed if something does go wrong. You're in a learning process. It should take some time. It should be some learning, and you don't have to make mistakes that totally end you. That's kind of what the reason is, taking some of that surplus income that you're not using, putting it towards investments, and watch those investments grow hopefully over time after some study, after some effort, things like that. All right, guys? So I know this type of video is not something I usually make, but talking about investments, talking about passive income, hey, even the FIRE movement, these are things that genuinely interest me on a personal level. If you want to see more, let me know. If you want to talk about more, let me know. But thank you guys for watching. I'll see you soon. Peace out. Bye.